Are we... So...
You.
Yep. That's me. Oh, fuck. I just put it in.
Yep, it's got to go.
Okay. Can I, like, stick it on my computer?
You can.
Can I stick on my gushers?
Sure. You can do whatever you want.
I'd love to have that exchange with no context, just clips.
I've got it.
Great.
And I just hit record.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a WCNY podcast about power and politics in New York State government. And on this episode, we're handing out the first annual Dispatches Awards for the recently completed legislative session. And joining me for this prestigious occasion are my Capitol colleagues from the Times-Union, Capitol reporter Raga Justin, and Capitol Confidential author Dan Clark. So we are recording about a week after the official end of the legislative session. The Assembly got out of town, I think, on the 17th. Now, with a week in our rearview mirror, do you both feel like there's been enough time to reflect on what's happened, or do you still need mental health counseling to really address the PTSD?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like there's enough time because I feel like it was all happening in real time, so I can reflect on it really quickly and easily. But at the same time, I think that there's around 700 bills left for the governor to consider. So certainly there are things tucked in there that I have no idea what they are and are worth a second look.
Very true. As for me, I kind of forgot everything that happened over the past couple of months.
Great.
I was thinking about this and was like, what happened in January? Like, it's been kind of an insane whirlwind of a session. Not maybe for what actually ended up happening, but just like living through it. I think this is the first year that I felt each day contained so many multitudes that...
Well, there's that, and then there's everything happening at the federal level, too.
Right. There's just so much going on all the time.
Right. It's very hard to keep track of what happened yesterday and what happened in March.
And the mayoral race, surprisingly enough, for an Albany paper, I mean, it was just the talk of the town.
Yeah.
It's this political hot topic. So that occupied more of my time than I thought it would.
Sticking with the idea of time, I was going to ask you, Dan, about your first session now in this new role of Capitol Confidential, except that as I checked your LinkedIn, this was your second time
It was.
doing this. And I'm curious, does time have any meaning to you, or is it all overlapping, all happening at once? Is it something like the seer in Game of Thrones, the Raven, or whatever it is? I don't know how you process time after all these years.
Well, it's strange how covering the legislative session kind of feels time-wise like you're back in grade school. Because you have this busy part from January to June. And then from June to January, we're kind of just hanging out and seeing what happens and covering all types of different things. But in terms of looking at session to session, I mean, at the end of the day, nothing really changes here in terms of process, transparency. The issues change, but the major players usually don't shift around as quickly as those issues. So I think it becomes really easy to predict where they're going to go and how they're going to approach things because old habits die hard, they would say.
Yeah, I think that contributes to one session feeling like another because while the specific dollar amounts and issues may change a little bit, this conversations all seem like ones that we've had in the past. I don't know, does that feel that way to you, Rog, after like 2 or 3 sessions?
Well, I don't know that I've been here long enough to say that with firsthand experience, but I reported a story kind of on the process of Albany recently, and the analogy...
That was a long story, huh?
1,600 words. The thing that people kept saying to me was Groundhog Day, referring to the movie where the same day repeats
seen the
over
movie?
and over again. Nope. But I know who's in it.
No.
Bill Murray.
Well, hang on.
Sorry, I got so excited that I broke.
You broke the mic.
Okay, you're good again.
Groundhog Day
Oh, yeah.
is one of the best movies ever produced.
Did it win an Oscar?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have no idea. Bill Murray of Ghostbusters fame.
Interesting. What's that? Just kidding. Just kidding.
You've never seen Ghostbusters.
I've never seen it.
Exactly.
You've never seen
I saw the reboot.
Marshmallow Man?
I mean, I'm familiar with the concept.
Well, Groundhog Day is perfect. It's a little problematic at the end of the day, kind of like 50 First Dates.
What isn't? Yes.
Yes. But very, very good. I'd recommend it.
Okay. Well, apparently we're living it.
Oh, well, yeah.
In Albany.
Yeah.
So
you don't need to watch.
Well,
I've experienced.
Let's stick with the problematic aspect. Do you think it's problematic for a man to basically go on multiple dates over and over again with a woman, and she doesn't remember any of them because the day isn't repeating for her, and he can kind of hone his romantic
Yes,
attack?
there's all these questions about like consent and such.
And do you tell her after? At the end of Groundhog Day, when he advances beyond the day and is with her, does he then tell her, hey, honey, we just went on 200 dates and I groomed you.
Groomed you, but you have the memory of a goldfish.
Yeah.
And that's one of the interesting points. You bring up 200 dates. There's a lot of speculation about how many times he relived the same day because he is able to play the piano. He memorizes every little bit of things that happen in the town,
Sure.
so he can basically appear to be a god. And it seems like he's there for years and years and years.
I would milk it.
Yeah.
What is it about her that's so fascinating to him? I don't think I watched this in a hotel room when I was like 6.
Andy McDowell in the 80s is
Hold on,
a
50
gem.
First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore?
Oh,
No,
this
we're
is
talking
Groundhog
about
Day.
Groundhog Day.
Thank God. I was like, what are we talking about?
You're right. There actually is nothing special about Drew Barrymore, though.
Yeah.
So I can understand the confusion.
I'm dazed and confused right now.
Another good
Oh,
movie.
my God. We can't even get
Guys, come on. we got work to do.
Okay, well, the awards show, unlike our drafts, it's going to be a little different. Kind of do a round-robin conversation. No snakes here. If somebody brings up a topic that you wanted to touch on, feel free to weigh in. Feel free to say where it was going to be. I don't know if we're going to hand out awards in every category
Sure.
that I identified. Just want to do the ones people feel passionate about. Raga, you raised your hand.
I did raise my hand. I have a question. For audio purposes, is it going to screw everything up if I open and eat some Gushers right now?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Are you sure? Because you made me spit out my gum.
Yeah,
before
because
this
gum
happened.
is a problem.
Okay.
Dan, how are you feeling coming into the awards ceremony?
I am feeling very good. I don't understand totally why we wouldn't give it an award for every category, because that's what I thought.
Oh, we can if you have something.
No, I don't necessarily think everybody deserves an award.
Yeah, if you feel like you have a category where just like, I'm only going through the motions, I don't want to do that. This is
Ad hoc.
the level of quality in these awards. I want to be at 100. I don't want us to feel just lukewarm about some of these things.
Oh, I feel 100.
Then these are awards that are going to be given out.
Great.
I want to start with the one I feel the strongest about. Prerogative as host. Biggest loser. I don't know if I remember to flag this for both of you, but it was suggested to me by a listener recently, and the biggest loser to me from the session is the environmental movement / Judith Inc. And I think the environmental movement started off on a bad note when the governor said, cap and invest? Let's put that on the back burner for a little bit, but can I interest you in $1 billion over 5 years? And then Judith, in particular, was pushing the EPR bill. This was her baby, and not only did she not get the bill, she ended up getting in a tiff with the Assembly Speaker, which is not really what you want to be doing if you have to get stuff through the legislature. So no judgment on whether they were right or wrong about the policy that they were pushing, but the environmental movement took a big L as far as I'm concerned. I'm seeing some head nodding, so who wants to...
Big L. I mean, the packaging bill in particular, I mean, in some senses, Judith was a big winner this session, only because it was Judith and like 2 other enviro lobbyists versus like literally, I think there were like 53 lobbyists that were retained to oppose the
A lot more
EPR
money
bill.
spent against.
Yes, exactly. And the fact that she was able to get it almost to the floor for a second year shows a lot of strength. However...
We don't grade on a curve here.
Exactly. However, the fact that the Assembly has once again passed on this at the very last moment for the second year in a row has got to be the biggest disappointment in the world for her. I can't imagine getting right to the finish line and for a second time being told, no.
Yeah,
we're
it
not
felt
doing
like
that.
a really human frustration, I
Yeah.
think, that she was expressing. Again, not opining on whether that's the right or wrong way to engage with the speaker. Obviously, it seems like sort of a bad move strategically if you want to try again for a third year in the row. But it just, I understand. I mean, you hear when you're walking up through the halls of the assembly, you hear all the lobbyists kind of talking amongst themselves. And there is a lot of that frustration and anger sort of bubbling behind the scenes, but a lot of them don't dare let it show because it hurts the cause. And at the end of the day, it's you're getting paid to do a job. But for the environmentalists, I think more so than many other advocacy issues, it's a very deeply personal issue for a lot of them.
And there isn't really a gray area in it.
Not to
for
them.
Not to them, at least.
Exactly.
And Raga, when did you realize this wasn't going to get passed in the assembly? Because as of a few hours left in the session, you were still willing to take bets that it was going to pass.
Yeah, I was, because of what happened last year, which is the first time I've Groundhog Dayed it. And as far as I know, this is what happens year after year. There's sort of a last minute, boom, magic. It gets called up and they vote on it like that overnight, and then you wake up and something big has happened. I'm thinking of the Superfund from last year, of course,
Right.
but I guess that did not happen this year.
I left here and
Yeah.
did not look at the internet, and then woke up and see that they didn't pass it, and I was genuinely surprised.
My takeaway also from the vote tally, the whip count that Judas was putting together, was a clear indicator that they didn't listen to the Dispatches episode featuring Assembly member Amy Paulin, who talked about getting a vote on medical aid and dying. And she basically said that the speaker told her, just because someone's on your bill, just because someone says, oh, maybe they're a soft yes, or they'll vote yes if it gets to the floor, don't count them as a yes. Because I think the speaker is clearly the one who's the most responsive to his members. And I think he knows what's going on better than she did.
No, and they're qualifying these yeses. Like, it's not, there are grades to the yes, right? It's not that a yes means a yes. As one lobbyist put it to me, they'll say yes to your face, but there'll be a reluctant yes to someone else's.
Right.
And when you're tallying up the reluctant yeses, sometimes that means no.
And I think there were 77 or 78 co-sponsors that were Democrats. That's too tight. On a bill like that, that's too tight to bring it to the floor.
And some of them are probably no's.
Yeah, some of them are probably no's. Some of them are going to go to the bathroom. Some of them are not going to be
James
in the
Skoufis
chamber.
Prize of Honor and Valor Award to those in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm sure we'll get into this later on, but there's a very notable exception to this rule that we're talking about where the margin it feels a little too thin to actually pass something. But I mean, medical aid and dying is like a prime example of something that, at least it seemed like the margin was really thin.
Well, Raga, do you have an award you'd like to give out now?
Can I just do that? Can I jump
Sure.
ahead? Okay, I have a couple. Well, that was my session winner, actually.
Let's hear it.
I have
medical aid
different
and dying.
categories.
Oh,
I have a whole different list. So we're going to roll with it.
did we each get two different emails?
No.
Oh, you just
probably
made
not.
up your own
No, I
categories.
didn't make them up. It was from a Google Doc that you shared with me.
Like I said, it's the first annual Dispatches. We don't have a good name for it. We don't have great categories, but we'll get there.
This
so
is amazing.
Why don't you hand out what your session winner is, Raga, and
Sure.
sort of elaborate on it. And Dan, you can tell us what your award show came up with.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay,
Raga.
well, I'm going to go with my session winner as a category in my version of the show, medical aid and dying movement. The Compassion and Choices organization in particular, I think they've really been behind this mobilization of the folks in yellow shirts who have lined the hallway down under for as long as I've been here. I've seen these people in yellow shirts. And what's so interesting is I remember coming here and the tone in which these people were being spoken about was one of sort of like, it was eye roll. It was a little like they're here for a cause that obviously they care a lot about.
But it's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. And, I was assigned as a Hearst Fellow to write about it because it wasn't like the topic du jour. Like, it was the thing that you made the fellow do. You wrote about medical aid and dying. So now, 2.5, 3 years later, I was there when they passed it in the Senate, and I went upstairs afterwards, and there was a little victory party sort of happening upstairs with both the bill sponsors, Brad Hoylman-Siegel and Amy Paulin in the Assembly, Corinne Carey, who leads Compassion and Choices, and a bunch of the advocates and everything. And the mood was really, it was one of jubilation. It was one of like relief, I think, to have been proven right. I'm air quoting for purposes of audio. I'm air quoting to be proven right and to have felt like that vindication that like this decade-long fight really won at the end of the day. And there is also a lot that will happen between now and ultimate, getting this signed into law. Obviously.
If it's signed.
Right. That's the thing. Who knows if it will be. But for the purposes of session, I would pick them as the biggest winner.
Interesting for Amy, for the assembly member. She had told me that the big reason why this got the votes in her chamber this year was the turnover in the assembly. So she was able to kind of lobby younger, newer members on the bill, whereas some of the more veteran, older members who had opposed it were gone from the chamber. So it was a really interesting issue and not one that I would have considered partisan necessarily if you could take the religious element out of it.
That's a good point.
I think that changes a lot of opinions for people.
So, Dan, do you have an award for medical aid in dying?
I had that one for biggest surprise.
Oh, that was my runner-up for biggest surprise.
Love that.
Yeah, that's what I had because I don't think anybody was expecting the vote in the assembly up until like the day before. And then when it happened, that kind of set in motion everything that happened afterwards in the Senate and now setting up for their lobbying campaign for the governor too.
So I'll stick with biggest surprise then, and the one for me was the unemployment insurance money ending up in the state budget because when the governor announced her budget deal, there was no money in it for unemployment insurance, and then a couple days later, the money is there. And
we found $7 billion for the first time in history.
Yeah, the ability to move the governor behind the scenes is, I thought, kind of unprecedented in that way because this was not something that seemed to have any pulse at that point and was just there at the end. And so I was shocked by that because you think that things around the margins can get included at that point. You want to put in some changes to the campaign finance laws. You want to screw over the Cannabis Control Board chair. You could tuck that kind of stuff in there. But like you said, $7 billion. So that was the biggest surprise for me this session.
I stuck that one in who I thought was the biggest winner of session, the business interests. I like everything that I was covering closely and looking at it. If business touched it, they got their way. So with the UI debt, I was covering a potential increase to the short-term disability benefit. Business interests tanked that because of the cost.
And that's something that passed the Senate and got held up in the Assembly last year, and they claimed they were ready to go.
Exactly. And same thing with EPR. They were ready to go, but business kind of steamrolled it and pushed it away. Same thing with the New York Heat Act. I think that this is a time where the governor and the legislature are really responsive to business interests because they want to see the state's economic value go up so that hopefully we can attract a little bit more people, which, by the way, misconception, our population did grow over the last year by about 100,000 people. So something is happening that is bringing people here, whether those are just all migrants or citizens, and I don't know.
I thought of Carl Heastie as my biggest winner from the session because of the unemployment insurance issue.
Best public speaker in Albany.
For listeners, you don't know what that is, but you will know sooner than later. When I think about his introductory remarks this session, we talk about one session repeating another. This stood out, his comment about unemployment insurance, and he staked a claim on that early, talked about it often, and he got it. And I can't say the same for the Senate. I can't tell you what Senate Leader Stewart-Cousins wanted from this session. Maybe she got it, maybe she didn't. Wasn't clear the same way it was with Speaker Heastie, who got this issue, which, like you said, was a big priority for business, but I think was also a really big priority for the New York State AFL-CIO because of what it means for those unemployment benefits to increase moving forward. And maybe you can make an argument that the governor was the big winner because she got her key budget priorities, but I think at the end of the day, there's not going to be any subsequent bounce for her because of this. So I don't necessarily call her the biggest winner, but Speaker Carl Heastie, he's my big winner from the session.
And he held the line on the criminal justice changes that were in the budget.
He came in and started negotiating with the district attorneys.
Right. Particularly in the assembly, Democrats there really held the line on that. And they would not they would not come to a place that reflected the governor's proposal. They wanted to make sure that it reflected what they wanted as well. And at the end of the day, if they had just agreed to the governor's proposal, this budget would have been done in early April, but they held it out.
Raga, would you like to do a category?
What was the last one you just did?
I just did biggest winner.
Oh, you just did biggest winner. I mean, we touched on the prison package. I was actually going to go off of that with the category most underrated.
That is my most underrated as well.
Oh, no kidding.
Well, depends on what this angle you're going to do for prisons.
I think maybe we'll have a different one. I think it obviously got a lot of attention back in, January, February.
December, January.
Yeah, after the death of Robert Brooks, and then after that, things sort of picked up. And then we had the Wildcat strike, which was very heavily covered. I'm not going to say that wasn't. I think, especially for us upstate, it was a big deal.
Especially for the Times Union.
And managing editor, Brendan J. Lyons.
Oh, yeah. But I think the staffing issues in correctional facilities are something that I've just been hearing about for so many years. I think they really came to the forefront this year because of the absolutely tragic consequences that occur when you have the perfect storm of conditions that we seem to have been hearing about in correctional facilities. But I think the staffing problem particularly is just one of those things it's going to boil over again if something isn't fixed.
Yeah, this for me is the underrated story, the prison strike and the staffing, because what was in the budget is not going to dramatically change things. Bring in the 18-year-olds and their limited capacities, not going to dramatically change the landscape. And I think it's also an underrated story because I don't know about you guys, but I feel like prisons and prison issues to a certain degree are a bit of a black box for me, because you can have on the prison guards, you can have on the progressive criminal justice advocates, and you're getting their perspectives, but I personally don't feel like I have a good sense of what's actually happening in a prison, and so maybe it's underreported, maybe it's underrated, but I think that all that contributes to the prison strikes and the issues it highlighted being kind of the underrated story of the year.
I think both big sides of that issue, looking at the correction officers and incarcerated people and the advocates, they both don't realize that they're both right on certain things. But they're not willing to say that.
Well, it's such an adversarial system that we're pitting them against each other.
Exactly.
Right? It's kind of impossible to find that level of compromise, I think.
Exactly.
Wow, not to get too philosophical, but I think it also says something about human nature, just like medical aid and dying.
It does.
I love that we can get deep together. This is a safe space for that.
This truly is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dan, do you have an award you'd like to give out?
Oh, my God. Like, I have so many is the thing.
Great.
That's
a good problem to have, Dan.
That's a good
biggest disappointment, which I think was the biggest loser category, but I'm going to make my own. Biggest disappointment, I think, is affordability. It's as if after the first week of November, Democrats discovered that it costs too much to live here. I don't understand it.
They went out to make an omelet and they were like, eggs cost how much?
Well, kind of, yeah.
I've only been eating bacon.
In December, when we heard from Democrats in New York, we heard the people at the polls, we hear that it's too expensive. You're just hearing that? What are you talking about?
I think they couldn't acknowledge the costs because the whole problem for them was that the Democrats controlled the White House. And so you can't talk about costs and then say it's not Joe Biden's fault.
That's true. Country over party, I always say.
I always think about that with you. I mean, that Dan.
You look at Dan and you're like, yeah, he's a real...
Country over party.
Sure. That's right.
America first.
Listen, I have a motto, and it's a better tomorrow. And a better tomorrow for everybody, not just one person or one group.
Dan, how many accent walls do you have at home that are just the American flag?
4.
Yeah.
In different rooms.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Is it just one room with all 4 walls American flag?
Of course not.
Okay.
That wouldn't be an accent wall.
Well, right.
Should we go back to twin sets?
Again, another reference listeners will have to pick up in a future episode.
So affordability, because I acknowledge that both chambers proposed affordability proposals, and the budget included some affordability proposals, including an income tax cut. But for me, that income tax cut was 0.1.
Yeah, but you make excess of millions of dollars a year, so that's going to be a big change for you.
The thing is, if I was a big roller, and let's say I was making $100,000 at my newspaper, a 0.1% reduction is me cutting off $100 a year. What are you talking about? That's not doing anything for me. And I don't have children, so the child tax credit does not help me. I'm just looking at this from the perspective of somebody who doesn't fit into the boxes that Democrats try to hit to get people to the polls. I'm somebody who doesn't have children, is of moderate income, and doesn't benefit from a lot of the things that they do. So I can see why a lot of people around the state look at these actions and say, thanks, but we need more.
So this was my overrated issue of the session, Governor Hochul's affordability agenda. You mentioned the middle class tax cut. I also think of the, $2 billion we're spending on rebate checks?
Guys, say what you will, but I'm excited for $300.
It's not even going to cover my utility bill for 1 month.
Exactly.
I'm ready for it.
You'll blow it off, and you're not going to think about it a month after that.
I'm not saying I will. I'm excited for the prospect of $300.
Right. And I don't think it's going to influence how you vote. I don't think for most people it's going to influence how they vote. And I also don't think it's going to have a substantive impact on the lives of most people. We did an episode for Capitol Press Room recently about the baby bucks. The state put aside $8.5 million to give the poorest of poor families $1,800. There are, I learned, 100,000 births each year for Medicaid families. Only 5% of them are going to qualify for this money. And if you took that $2 billion in rebate checks, you could fund that entire Medicaid population getting quote-unquote baby bucks for years and years and years. And you could say we're really doing something for low-income families. But instead, there's going to be a family in suburbia New York City that's going to get a $300 check. And like Dan said about utility bills, be like, well, this covers none of our groceries. And I just don't think there's any benefit to that. I think the governor and the assembly held the line on things that are billed as affordability, like EPR, like we talked about, like the cap and invest. And I think there's not going to be anyone in the polls in November next year who come and say, boy, I'm really glad the governor drew a line in the sand on plastic reduction, or I'm really glad the governor isn't increasing my utility bill from cap and invest, because all they're hearing really is all these renewable energy projects are already driving up my energy bill. So I think it's such an overrated issue for the governor to talk about it and deliver, like he said, what they delivered.
But you could not talk about it back in January.
Oh, yeah.
It was like the thing to talk about if you wanted to hit your marks.
But these weren't the policies to deliver on it.
Right.
And they should have been talking about affordability every week of the year through the end of the session. They should have been driving it home, passing bills. But instead they just kept on getting distracted by various different things because of the budget, because of things happening after the budget. And by the end of the session, affordability just fell by the wayside. I can't think of anything.
There's some ratepayer, some utility bills.
There's some utility bills, but there's also like little things around the edges, like no cost sharing for inhalers. That's great if you need an inhaler like me. But not great for people who don't need it.
Why are you laughing? Is it because of his medical frailty?
Yeah, I didn't realize you were a nerd.
Oh no, it's
with
only
asthma.
It's only when I run.
I'm sorry. This is not supposed to be offensive to anybody.
I didn't realize you were a nerd.
Asthma. I would have asthma, I think, in a different life. I'm
Probably.
not sure it was something that was meant for me. And
Maybe
I
in this
escaped
life,
it.
there's still time.
Jesus Christ.
Adult onset asthma.
Let the
It's a
record
real
reflect.
thing. We're raising money this year
Yeah?
to prevent
How much?
adult onset asthma.
$18.5 million.
Well, $8.5 million is all that went for baby bucks.
Sorry. We're going to raise $10 million more for adult onset asthma, please.
Well, this is a good time to mention that Dispatches from Albany is brought to you with support from New York State United Teachers, a union that had some victories this year. They got their restrictions on school smartphones, and they also had, at the end of the year, a study on access to recess. So thank you to New York State United Teachers for your constant support of Dispatches.
Was that a real ad break?
I made it into a real one.
That was hilarious. I really thought you were doing a bit.
No, I figured I would give them a little plug.
Sure. Well,
I'm supposed to.
This is a perfect segue into my most overrated issue.
Hit me.
Which was the bell-to-bell school cell phone ban.
Why?
I just got tired of it. Genuinely,
it's a big substantive policy.
I'm sure it is. I am sure it is. I am not denying. Again, the merits of this thing, I am sure are great. I, as a rule, agree that we are all on our cell phones too much. I think it's probably pretty bad for developing brains. I don't have kids. I don't care about this right now. Also, I don't know. I just was like, I'm hearing too much about it, and you guys are all way too victorious about this bell-to-bell cell phone ban.
And maybe I'm too old now, because when I was in high school, smartphones were like just being conceived.
Yeah.
The iPhone maybe came out.
Yeah.
What grade did you get a smartphone, or what grade did you get a cell
I love
phone?
this
Excuse me.
question.
I didn't have a cell phone in high school.
No, cell phone.
What did you use?
I didn't.
A landline,
You guys used landline?
an AIM.
Well, yeah, I had to use a landline when I was at home. But when I
How
wasn't
did you
at
talk
home,
to
I
your
was not reachable.
How did you talk to your friends?
On the landline.
Okay.
Yeah, with a little twisty twirly.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of cute.
You didn't have a cordless
No,
landline?
I did. But it's fun to imagine that you're twisty twirly.
Well, if you're going to do that, do a rotary phone. Hello, operator.
But phones weren't allowed out when I was in high school. And I don't know when the school districts said you can have them out, I guess. Like, if we were to go back 15 years or so, why did this happen in the first place, that we needed a law to ban them?
So I was in high school at a time when there were many cell phones in use. And I think you really saw administrators kind of struggling with how to curb cell phone use while you were like presumably in AP classes and trying to learn.
Humble brag. Now
Me and
who's the
everybody
nerd?
else. Okay.
Probably a lot of kids
anyone
with
was
asthma in
disputing
that class.
They cut the Wi-Fi, I remember, at one point, actually. And it was this kind of like guerrilla move to try to get all of us to get so frustrated with the service that we just like didn't use our phones. It obviously didn't work. And there was a lot of drama that got started from some Instagram groups. But yeah.
Instagram didn't exist when I was in high school, just an FYI.
Okay. I don't know that you guys want to confess to that on air.
I'm fine.
Okay. It came out when I was in 8th grade, I think. Anyway, I think it's a good policy. I think this gets me on a topic that I just get angry about, which is like, why are so many kids exposed to screens all the time? Like
Yes.
when they're children, like I think that this is, again, I don't have kids, so it's way easier said than done. But I remember growing up, there was TV. We had there were screens around me, but I was limited. TV. Like I was not allowed to go on them, and I was forced outside. I don't think it's crazy that we require kids to do that now. It doesn't like just the proliferation of screens doesn't mean kids automatically are going to be iPad kids. It's because you give them the iPad, right?
Kick your kids outside.
Kick your kids outside.
Lock the door.
But again, we're childless people talking about this. I want to clarify.
It was the introduction of unlimited data that's creating this problem.
Oh, you're right.
Remember, I don't know if you remember this, Dan, but you used to have to pay per text message.
Yeah.
It was like 35 cents per text message. And one time we got a bill like for hundreds of dollars because I had no idea. And then it was the same thing with data. It was like you were downloading what with your phone? If we just got rid of unlimited data and you had to pay for your data, problem solved, because parents would be like, you can't use your phone there.
It's like the pay per bullet.
Pay per bullet?
Have you guys heard of this?
No. What are you, like, planning a mass shooting?
No, I'm not doing that. I'm just saying, give people guns, sure. Make them pay per bullet.
Well, they already do charge per bullet right now. You don't get free bullets with your guns.
Well, no. You have to pay for, like, a lot of bullets.
So you want to make bullets more expensive?
Way
Is your gun
more
control
expensive.
policy?
Yeah. Individual bullets, like, thousands of dollars.
Just one.
Yeah.
Well, you don't need 10 bullets to kill a deer.
You do if you're a bad shot.
Okay. That was an Andrew Cuomo reference.
Oh. I didn't get it.
I think that's what he said. 10 bullets? Yeah. And he yelled it.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the school cell phone ban.
I think it's a huge deal.
It's a big deal.
They force this down the throats of school districts.
Well, that was my thing was that it's most overrated.
So how does that make it overrated?
That's my take.
No, do we all understand what the word overrated means? Like it's too much attention?
It got too much attention.
But it's such a big deal. So how could it be getting too much attention?
Is it a big... I mean, like...
Dan, you want to weigh in?
I think it's a big deal.
Judge Clark?
I think it's a big deal, but there wasn't really opposition to it, is the thing. Like, the governor was like, I want to ban cell phones, and NYSA, and, like, everybody and their mother was like, yeah, let's do it. And then it just happened.
She, like, rested on her laurels from that achievement for, like, months.
She is still doing it. She like, I think she just put out an op-ed the other day that was like, distraction-free schools are great.
Yeah, because they're implementing it right now.
Right.
Figuring out, do they get the blue bags to lock the things up, or do they get the green bags? I mean, there's so much choice at the local level.
But also some kids aren't going to... I mean, some people aren't going to use... There's not going to be a technology. It's just going to be, like, up to the school districts or the kids themselves to voluntarily enforce this, right? Not everyone is getting a pouch system.
I mean, everyone has to have some sort of bell-to-bell restriction.
Yeah, but how they implement it is completely up to the
Yeah,
school
do you want to put it in your
districts.
lockers, or do you want to put it in a kangaroo's pouch? I mean,
What about your back pocket? Just don't take it out during class.
That's not going to fly.
The governor suggested that teachers buy those shoe holders for over the door, and they put their cell phones.
I guess that is a pouch system.
One man's pouch is another man's shoe holder.
That's right.
That's great.
Dan, would you like to go?
I would love to go. I'm going to do MVP only because I just ran this data yesterday. MVP, James Skoufis. He passed more bills than anybody in the legislature this year. He passed 43 bills. It is quite a few bills. There are only 17 lawmakers in the legislature who passed more than 20 bills for the whole year. So for him to have more than double of that is huge. Of course, Skoufis puts himself in things that I think he knows are going to take multiple years to get to, even your elections and controversial stuff like that. But I think he also puts himself on things that may be easier to get across the finish line too. And he also has a ton of local bills.
What about his whiny floor speech from the budget?
I didn't even watch it.
He was like, the governor pushed a terrible budget through. She's an autocrat. We're going to have hearings now. I don't like this. And he's clearly mad at the governor, but I think he's also mad at the Senate majority for not going to bat for his priorities. And that was the only reason I was actually considering him for one of my biggest losers of the year, because people were kind of on the floor being like, yeah, we've heard it before, you've made your complaints, and what are you actually going to do about it? I mean, he's going to do these CDPAP hearings with Gustavo Rivera, and that'll probably embarrass the Hochul administration to a certain degree. But I didn't think that was a great look. And then he started the year on an L because he didn't get the DNC chair.
Oh, right. Big L.
But then he got position. They added him to some leadership role.
He's a vice chair. I don't know.
Sure. He's doing better than, what's the guy's name? David Hogg?
Oh, he's out.
Is that how you say his last name?
Yeah, I mean, H-O-G-G.
I've never pronounced it.
It's actually Hogg.
I'm feeling very vulnerable with you guys right now.
Don't be.
David Hogg.
Okay.
And the vulnerability.
That second G is quiet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was clearly not saying it.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other awards?
I'm going to go again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Underrated story.
Love it.
The issues involving transgender people and transgender children.
Yeah.
Because I covered this semi-closely this year, and I think that it doesn't get a lot of coverage because some reporters are scared to touch it because they're scared of using the wrong pronoun or using the wrong terminology, or they're scared that they don't understand it enough to report on it. And I think that translates to this perception that the media does not care about transgender people a lot of the time. And I think we saw that reflected this year with some of the very unique issues facing transgender people in New York, where we're now going to have transgender people coming to New York as a safe haven, kind of like abortion. Whereas we hear about New York as an abortion haven like every other week from the governor, we don't hear anything about gender affirming care. So it's one of these things that is not going to get better for this population anytime soon. And I didn't think it got the attention it deserved this year.
And I think that speaks to the lessons the Democrats learned from the 2024 elections.
Yeah.
Because they saw themselves taking an L on some of these cultural issues, and I think they think there's no coherent and persuasive way to talk about these issues in a way that appeals to center voters, center-right voters, let alone a right-wing voter. And I think there are some on the left who are generally pretty apathetic about this. I think about the LGBTQ movement in New York post same-sex marriage. There was a consensus, well, we did it. We solved all the problems that
Mission accomplished.
that the movement needs to touch. And then there were all these people, all the other letters saying, well, we have some other problems. Maybe Pride Agenda, you could touch on some of them. Nope, we did it. We solved it.
And then they shut down.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
it's a good point you bring up about the lack of attention. And this governor clearly has no interest in talking about transgender rights. I remember in the 2022 gubernatorial debate, there was one reference about teaching kids about sex ed and about the existence of gay people, and she completely fumbled the answer from a perspective of any sort of progressive sex education demand, whereas then Jumaane Williams did this very coherent, well thought out response. And I think the lack of attention almost comes from her lack of focus on it.
I think so too. And one other thing I want to mention about this issue is how some Republicans in New York are viewing it. The state Senate Republicans held this press conference a few weeks back on transgender girls and girls sports. And I found it really interesting because they said literally like quotes of like, we want these transgender people to be the transgender people that they are. We want them to be the gender that they are. We just don't want them competing in these sports. And it was strange to hear these state Republicans say, we support the rights of transgender people, just not these rights. Whereas on the national scale, it's like transgender people don't exist. So it's this interesting issue that I think is going to evolve much in the same way that I think gay marriage did.
Yeah, I think that's a winning issue, the way they talk about it, too.
Yeah.
It's this, like, compassionate conservative dialogue that I think is going to resonate with people. And I think it also could represent more of the mainstream position, and that could be why Democrats are not necessarily talking about things like transgender athletes.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a category?
What was that one that you just did in? Most underrated?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what else to do. I guess I have a TBD.
Yeah.
That's a category.
The old to be determined.
Right. What storyline is unresolved? I don't know that I'm anxiously awaiting this, but I am very curious about the Medicaid debates. It's kind of a low-hanging fruit, but once the U.S. Senate votes on that, I think the onus is going to be on Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Carl Heastie, and Kathy Hochul to be like, okay, time to put our money where our mouth is, or our lack of money where our mouth is.
Ooh.
And thanks. And actually do something, or at least commit on paper to doing something about these Medicaid cuts.
But I don't think they will. I think that Congress will come down with these Medicaid cuts, and I think that they will spend the next year, Democrats here will spend the next year and a half saying, look what these Republicans did to you.
It's an effective political strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of the TBD for me is how they respond. The governor has more of a role in this because she oversees the division of budget, and they're going to have to figure out whether there's any impact on cash flow this current fiscal year, whereas the legislature, and in part because of what they included in the state budget this year, can kind of take a back seat on this if they want. They can basically say to the governor, okay, this is on you. You're the one who's responsible for cash flow. We're going to stay in our districts for a while and let you try to own this. If I'm Kathy Hochul, I want to bring them in on any decisions so that they can't tar and feather me with this in 2026.
Instead, though, she gave herself a cap, a pretty high discretionary amount of money that she's allowed to play with before the legislature comes in and signs off on it, right? And I remember $2 billion. And both Carl and Andrea seemed to be like, yeah, okay, sure. I remember pressing them on this, being like, are you not mad? Are you not upset? And they were like, no.
Yeah, it's the same thing that they gave Cuomo during COVID.
Yeah. Do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I think the other person who's particularly interested in how that plays out is the lieutenant governor, because
I thought you were going to say Bill Hammond with the Empire Center.
Well, Bill will obviously be following along, but the lieutenant governor is going to be interested because right now I have to think the governor is in great position to win re-election, to get the party's nomination, but she can screw it up along the way. One of the things she can do is piss off or alienate different constituencies. And so if she has an option this fall of absorbing cuts and cutting Medicaid, or she has an option of increasing taxes and chooses not to do that, I think there's a chance that she pisses off the healthcare union, the teachers union, which then creates some avenues for him to explore and exploit potentially in 2026. So I think that's a big TBD as well.
Yeah, he's already saying that he supports higher taxes on high-income earners. So
a popular position.
This is a bit of a niche point with the Medicaid cuts or the Medicaid rollbacks that we are presumably going to see. But there's a very specific population that is going to be uninsured as a result of this. This is also thanks to Bill Hammond's report from a couple weeks ago that I was reading. But it's about 225,000 immigrants who are going to be, completely cut. The state has no obligation to take care of them. The country now will not have an obligation to take care of them. So it's 225,000 people who are just sort of out of health coverage.
And even if you don't care about those people,
even if you think that they shouldn't be here.
Yeah, even if you don't think that they should have health coverage, there is a problem with that. Anytime that they do need health coverage, they're going to end up in the ER, where they're going to be under no obligation to pay that bill at the end of the day. And that cost is going to be passed on to the hospital, which is going to be passed on to the state, which is going to be passed on to
us.
me.
Yep. Yep.
So bringing up immigration makes me kind of want to rethink my underrated award, because we didn't really talk much about immigration in substantive terms this legislative session. We had the visit by Tom Honan or Homan? I don't know. Homan. And
It's actually human. It's pronounced human.
it's pronounced hog.
Because he's...
And there wasn't really anything that got done substantively on immigration, in part because the governor has kind of a uncomfortable relationship with undocumented immigrants, and she wasn't prioritizing that. She only wanted to talk about it, in terms of, the nice family that was caught up wrongfully in some sort of sweep, or most recently with Brad Lander, who we're definitely sure is a legal immigrant. So I think that was kind of an underrated story, the fact that you have this national movement, and New York, which prides itself on a leader, didn't do anything.
Yeah. I think that there was a lot of talk, especially
huddled masses.
Yes,
A lot of huddled masses references.
well, we had people literally calling for the mayor's resignation because he met with Tom Homan, and there was a perception of a quid pro quo that he's going to have his criminal charges dropped and they're going to come in and do deportations. And a lot of people in the legislature said, he should be not deported.
I think some people probably wish he was
Could you
deported.
imagine?
Right? Deport him to New Jersey.
They're saying he should be taken out of office.
That's your
for that.
problem, Garden State.
Right. But they took that so seriously. But then they barely even considered New York for all at the end. So I guess it's a lot of talk, no game.
What did you want to say, Raga?
I don't know that I want to say it because I'm not super well versed in New York for all.
Don't let it stop you.
Right. When have I ever? I don't know that it would do. I don't know that it would be the magic bullet that would solve immigration problems in the state of New York. And so for that, now that we're talking about it, I think it's another one of those overrated pieces of legislation.
And just to be clear, you seem to be using the word overrated in different ways.
Interchangeably.
It's taken on, this one I think is correct use of overrated.
We know what we're talking about. You might not know.
That's right.
But everyone who's listening they're picking up what I'm putting down.
Defund NPR.
Dan, I imagine. Thank you. Appreciate that. Nice it wants to give us additional money. Maybe if you are considering sponsoring Dispatches from Planet Albany, now is a perfect time to reach our audience of high-powered lobbyists, government affairs professionals, lawmakers, and you can learn more about how to support this great journalism by contacting David.Lombardo at WCNY.org.
And CC me and Dan.
Yeah, why not?
Just for fun.
Dan, do you have any more words you'd like to give out?
The only one, and I'll just keep it short, overrated, the masks. I understand the concept, but we went back and forth about, should we just ban masks? Should we have a criminal charge? And, here's the thing. At the end of the day, is somebody who is committing a crime going to go rob a bank and say, but I better have my mask on? Or I better have my mask off, rather, because I'll be charged. That's it.
And that comes back to Jim Skoufis again, who was pushing that bill.
To James Skoufis.
And when he kind of got some version of it in the budget, he wasn't taking a victory lap about it. It was more like a shrug.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think overrated, using the classical Merriam-Webster definition that you were talking about, makes sense.
Okay, then you know what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to amend my belt. It was the one that I was tired of hearing about.
Sure.
That's my category. Most tired of hearing about the bell-to-bell cell phone ban.
I love
and
that.
And my actual most overrated might be New York for all. But I don't want to, I'm pissing off both NYSET and the immigration advocates.
That's okay. Make them mad.
Any other memories from the session, guys, before we move on with our lives?
I don't know. I'm good.
I will say the one thing that we didn't see was the governor do something as a surprise at the end of session, and I would love that to continue.
You don't like having some sort of big ugly of priorities from the governor?
I don't mind that, but don't announce congestion pricing is over.
Oh, I gotcha.
Some last-minute bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys looking forward to lawmakers potentially returning this fall, or would you like them to stay the hell away from the building?
I'd love them to come back. I don't understand why they're not here more.
They should be here full time.
I mean, they make $142,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that tax cut will give them $142,000 more.
And then add the $300 check on top of that, so you're looking at $142,000 and $300.
They're rolling in it. Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, we've been speaking with Dan Clark. He's the author of the Capitol Confidential newsletter, and Raga Justin, a Capitol reporter for the Times-Union. Raga and Dan, thank you so much for joining us at the first annual Dispatches Award ceremony. Like all good award shows, we went a little over on time, but luckily the local news will be held, and it'll pick up as soon as this podcast ends. So thanks very much, and see you guys at next year's award show.
Oh, I thought this was the first and last.
First annual.
Okay.
I love that.
Miss People-Stokes.
Mr. Speaker, members and staff, I love you all. It's been way too long for this session. I gotta go. Take care, be safe, and stay blessed.